on our show, they got their partnership on their show. I thought a cool topic would be the idea when you have to hold up a partner and like let's say you have to hold up your partner while they're maybe going through a down season and you have to pour into that other person when you're maybe you have not as much in your cup. And I thought that could be relationship based, romantic, or even friendship or even business. So what are you guys thoughts on those type of situations where but again, in the day, partnerships are kind of expected. Yo, if I'm down, you're supposed to hold me up, pick me up, keep me up. But then it's like the other person's also human.
Yeah.
So it's like I can only withstand possibly holding up so long without it being reciprocated in certain regards. So you guys have any thoughts or experience in those type of situations?
Ladies, feel free.
You can start. Okay, so first and foremost, I think that that's such an important topic to talk about, especially with
Thank you.
50-50 being such a predominant and repetitive conversation.
Yeah, it was too early.
But I think that like even in intimate and platonic situations, I've experienced that, and especially with my business partner sitting here, there's been times where our like my work life, for example, is just too much, and I'm not able to be as present or as hands-on with certain things as she is because she has the time freedom. So I think that having a certain level of grace is definitely required, and that's something that I had to learn, and I'm still in the process of learning. But overall, I think that when we really get into the nitty-gritty of it, a lot of people aren't really ready for partnerships as ready as they think they are, if that makes sense.
No, that's a fact.
Absolutely.
And I think another huge part of it is definitely communication. I feel like things get so misconstrued so many times because we just assume our partner should know that we need lifting in this area, or we just assume that it should be known already. But if there's no communication, that's what usually causes friction.
That's a fact. What's your thoughts on the Q?
So, we often talk about, men being the leaders and have, steer the ship ahead. I think that's a thing that kind of goes unspoken with men or in relationships, where it's like you have to, you're already kind of leading things and withstanding stuff. So then let's say, because everybody goes through down times and down seasons, but I think it's never really, communication is important, but I feel like it's also like, even if it's communicated, like how can you really communicate to someone properly if they also maybe not even in the season to even receive the information? So I'm telling you, it's like a lot for me to kind of hold this up, whatever. But do you even have the energy to even click in for overall? So I just think that's like it could be tricky because whether it's a time freedom, whatever, if you just genuinely don't have the time, even if you communicate it, it's also up to her to have the bandwidth and ability to still.
So I think that
keep afloat at the same time.
To your point, right? I think that when we start talking about the communication being effective, it comes down to being able to assess and adjust. So if you're in a down season and when it was two of y'all could carry 100 pounds because you got 50, this person got 50, but this person can't sustain carrying 100 pounds by themselves. So that's when it becomes overwhelming and overbearing. Okay, what about this weight can we get rid of in this season as well? So can we put off 40 pounds? So this 60 is like you only carry an extra 10. You follow what I'm saying? So for instance, if you're in a relationship and you, the man, and you lose your job, whatever the case may be, that's where downsizing becomes the conversation. Look, for the next 6 months or for the next 9 months, we finna go to your mom crib, my mom crib. You got to go here, I'll go there, or we got to go ahead and do that. We got to cut off these subscriptions. We got to do. That's where the plan comes into place to be able to assess and readjust so that you can start to pick the way back up. And it's transparent across the board in our partnerships because life is always going to be what it is, but it becomes a strain on a relationship when a person is trying to maintain and sustain the level of two people. You're not supposed to be able to do that, but it's like that's why one thing I never was afraid to do was downsize. I didn't got rid of cars. I didn't got rid of jewelry. I didn't got rid of shit like, oh wait, this shit gotta go because I went from a crib going back to a 1-bedroom just recently to now upgrade because I understand that in them seasons where it becomes challenging, whether you carrying it for a business partner, a relationship partner, or even just for yourself, you want to be able to assess and be like, all right, cool. If I want to get back to sustaining this is how I sustain in this season, but you never want to drop it. But what tends to happen in those seasons, it gets so heavy, what people do? They drop it. And then next thing you know, the relationship, the partnership, it tends to dissolve and it never survived those seasons because they never sat down, assessed, and then readjusted.
And also I would say as well, I feel often, we spoke to this before, and when like your partner's going through a journey and you're attached to that journey. I also feel we spoke about that's why like benchmarks are important. Cause let's say, you know what, I'm just gonna be down for like this amount of time.
6 months, 9 months.
Yeah, it's like, all right, say less. I'm gonna hold 100 for the 6-9 months. Then you get to 16 months. It's like, all right, like.
Okay, so I'm sorry to cut you off.
I guess.
But Okay, so the first thing that popped into my mind when you made your comment about like being able to like downsize or downscale in an intimate relationship, right? I think that the first thing that popped into my mind was that my level of grace is different in my partnership with women than it is in my relationship with men. Now that's a whole different other story. However, how do you extend grace when benchmarks aren't met?
That's when grace comes.
And then how do you reevaluate? Exactly.
Yeah.
That's when grace is most vital. But also, how do you reevaluate? Because also, I've been the friend that has been vented to about situations or relationships where it was like, okay, this was the expectation, this was the standard in the beginning, this was not met. You going through a hard season right now, but I'm not entitled to go through that with you. So when you talk about going obligated, yeah. But also when you talked about being assigned to the journey, it's like, that's real, but also what's the pros and cons and how do you identify when it's time to hold on and when it's time to let go because you hurting yourself even more in the process?
That really come down to your threshold, like your bandwidth, like your barometer. You gotta know that going into it. Like, look, this is my bound. This is what I'm. Well, you don't gotta say it, but it's a self thing. It's like, all right, I know how much that I can endure on this journey, and then after a while, you gotta be honest with yourself because a detriment to you is a detriment to the relationship. Because then you're not gonna want to show up because now you irritated. Like a motherfucker might just be getting a spark, but you already 6 months past your threshold. So now you got the energy that is swung. So it's really about being able to assess that and identify, like, you know what? I know that I could, when they start to get a little challenging, I'm gonna start to communicate that. Like, all right, this is becoming a challenge. When they become overwhelming or overbearing, I'm gonna communicate that as well. And when they become too much, guess what? That's my final end all be all. It became too much. I tried. I could walk away knowing that I gave you the amount of grace that I had to give, because grace should be unlimited, but opportunities aren't, right? So it's like, I got an unlimited amount of grace for you to grow, but the opportunities I'm gonna give you to hold me, absolutely not. Like, that has a limit, and that's what we got to know going into it, so that we don't stay 10 years past our threshold. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on grace being unlimited, though?
I feel like unlimited grace comes from Jesus Christ himself.
That's why it has to be unlimited, though. Because
And he instills it in you, or you saying only he has it for you?
No, he instills it within us as believers, right? But also we go through this wrestle between flesh and spirit, like, right, in the principalities. It's difficult for us to sit here and say grace is unlimited and to follow by that, just like we're sinners by nature. It's certain things that we want to do, but our flesh and worldly desires just fight against that.
It's not really realistic.
But when I say unlimited, it just means that it's abundant. It don't mean that you have the capacity to give it unlimitedly. It's just saying, like, it should be no, like, how do you measure grace? Like, I got 10 times for you. It's really like, it's grace. If your kid not learning fast enough, you don't just say, fuck the kid. Oh shit, I should have got rid of, like, you extend grace. My kid just ate 4 apples. Like, why?
Somebody need to call my mom right now.
Cause like, but that's when you trigger. That's when you know it's lacking grace, because there's no patience. But sometimes we gotta go into these partnerships, into these relationships with the mindset of the grace that we would give our children, because those are the ones that we know. What I expect you 2. What I expect you 3. So it's like, we gotta start getting our partners. What I expect you going through it right now. So you're a little more irritable. You're a little less patient. You're a little more reactive. Not because this is who you are in the natural, but this is who you are in this season. How much I want to be around it is going to determine how much time I spend in that space. But the fact of the matter is, the grace is knowing that this ain't even you for real. This is who you are in this moment. But if it do or don't change, I'm gonna just understand that I gave you the grace to be able to do so, versus making you feel like you wrong for this, or like you're not. And that's what people do. They sit around and they'll condemn you for being down.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying. But I wanted to elaborate on it, but that's kind of like where I was thinking of it. It's unlimited because God was all forgiving. You could sin all day, every day, and still go back and pray, and still, like, that's what it was all for, right? That's why he rose, right, for that reason. So, who are we to not extend grace? I don't gotta tolerate. If you late every day, I could be like, all right, you know what? They got a lot going on in the crib, but you could still get fired. The grace ain't saying that you keep the job. It's like, I gave you grace. Like, I'm not about to curse you out. I'm not about to be mad. It's just, you just not the person for this position. And that's okay. But you still human, and I'm not about to sit here and look at you different. You just won't have this position.
So giving grace is just understanding.
100%. Essentially, that's the thing.
But not tolerating.
Yeah, that's your boundary. Because it's like, when do you feel like some? Imagine,
because tolerance is
that's
sorry,
your
but tolerance.
I'm trying to pass it to one of y'all.
Yeah, but I think the difference between the two, when you mention tolerance, is that's mercy. Mercy goes hand in hand with tolerance, but grace is really just understanding.
Yeah, it's just understanding. It's like, I feel you. Like, it's like, all right, cool. Like, you couldn't make it to work today. That's cool. That don't mean if you do it 10 times, you're not gonna get fired.
Still gotta go.